You uncovered that one man is on your birth certificate, but you grew up calling another man dad, who you claim is your daughter's biological father. You want an apology. Is that correct?
Your Honor.
And I'm hurt and I'm tired and I need to know who is my daddy. Told me that my mom told him that I wasn't his daughter.
Do you believe Ms. Aiken is Mr. Jenkins' biological child?
Yes, Your Honor.
You were told that Mr. Jenkins was your biological father?
I had a wonderful relationship with my daddy. I loved him dearly. That Thomas Lewis Aiken name was on my birth certificate, not Mr. Jenkins.
Why did you think your last name was Aiken and your father's last name was Jenkins?
When I got pregnant with her.
Okay, so she got the last name Aiken, but you were not technically together at the time.
No, we was not.
You were.
This case opens in a tense courtroom where generations of confusion, silence, and emotional wounds are gathered under one roof. Families enter with heavy histories, and Judge Lake stands ready to navigate the complicated intersection between law and justice. The room is filled with individuals whose lives have been shaped by unanswered questions, uncertain identities, and the painful consequences of secrets. This is not simply a legal matter, it is a personal unraveling. At the center of the proceedings is a woman who has brought her own mother to court, claiming she has been a victim of paternity fraud. She enters with decades of emotional exhaustion behind her, insisting that she deserves the truth that was to her for 30 years. In her voice, one can hear the echo of every child who has lived without knowing where they come from. She describes that the man she grew up loving, who raised her as his own, might not be her biological father. For her, this courtroom is not just another evidence stage in a divorce case or custody battle. It is the place where identity, memory, and broken trust collide. Judge Lake listens carefully, embodying the balance between empathy and authority that so many listeners admire on shows like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, Truth Changes Everything podcast, and the Divorce Course podcast. Each word spoken in this courtroom adds another layer to the complex relationship between law and justice. The judge understands that evidence is more than documents. It is a bridge connecting the past to the present. As the mother takes the stand, the courtroom feels divided between truth and denial. She insists that she always believed one man was the biological father, but her daughter counters this by presenting documents, particularly a birth certificate, that lists a completely different name. The confusion deepens as the mother is confronted with the accusation that she misled both the child and the families involved. The daughter fights tears as she explains how she discovered one name on the birth certificate, even though she grew up calling someone else dad. This revelation forces the court to explore the meaning of paternity far beyond blood alone. It highlights what adoption stories often reveal. Biology matters, but the emotional foundation built by a parent often matters even more. Judge Lake has witnessed countless people regret taking a DNA test, not because the result was wrong, but because the truth carried consequences that stretched into every corner of their lives. The truth has the power to heal, but it also has the power to shatter. Throughout the testimony, discussions arise about the adverse inference in evidence law, where silence, avoidance, or inconsistent answers may lead the court to draw conclusions based on what a party refuses to admit. The courtroom's grounding in jurisprudence becomes clear. The concept of justice in jurisprudence isn't just about rules, but about fairness, clarity, and closure. Every statement given, every inconsistency detected, and every reaction observed forms its own kind of testimony. In the middle of this emotional storm stands a man whose name appears on the birth certificate. He insists he was incarcerated during the time of conception and therefore could not possibly be the biological father. His tone reveals a mixture of confusion and calm resignation, because he learns this truth himself only recently. He claims he did not sign the birth certificate knowingly. His version of events challenges the mother's statement directly, creating a clash that Judge Lake must sort through with precision. The courtroom then turns its attention to the memory of the man the daughter believed to be her father, Henry. Even though he passed away, his presence is felt in every emotional word. Judge Lake acknowledges that families often create their own truths when biology isn't clear. Love becomes its own kind of evidence, but legal confirmation still matters deeply. The court cannot rely only on memory. They require scientific proof. Because the alleged biological father is deceased, an avuncular uncle to niece, DNA test is administered through Henry's brother. This brings science into a space filled with emotions. Across podcasts, legal commentary, and courtroom analysis, DNA tests are often described as the moment when truth becomes unavoidable. Many cheating stories, family conflicts, and long-hidden secrets have been unraveled in similar courtrooms. But for this woman, this test represents 30 years of searching. The tension rises as Judge Lake prepares to read the results. The courtroom falls into a deep silence that stretches across every seat. With each passing second, the daughter braces for a truth she has both feared and needed. The results reveal that the man listed on the birth certificate is not her father. Her breath collapses under the weight of confirmation. She hoped for clarity, but the clarity she receives begins to unravel hope. Judge Lake remains steady, presenting the information with compassion. Then comes the second result. Henry, the man she loved and believed was her father, also is not her biological father. The revelation hits the courtroom with devastating force. Judge Lake acknowledges the pain immediately, offering guidance and reaffirming the emotional truth that biology does not erase the love she received. Yet the daughter's face tells the story of someone thrown back into a storm without a compass. This is where the courtroom transforms. It is no longer just a legal space. It becomes a place of emotional recovery. Viewers familiar with Celebrate Recovery testimonies would recognize this moment. A confrontation with pain, followed by a slow step toward healing. Even Judge Lake's approach resembles that of a compassionate counselor rather than a distant evaluator. The mother's inability to offer a clear answer about who the biological father could be deepens the emotional chaos. She insists she only had one partner, but her daughter, Judge Lake, and the entire courtroom see inconsistencies in her statements. The judge questions her firmly, reminding her that honesty is the only path forward now. But the mother appears confused, unable to recall with certainty events from 30 years ago. The daughter breaks down, explaining how her childhood memories are shaped by the love from the man she believed was her father and his mother, who raised and protected her. But love cannot replace the missing truth, and the DNA evidence has now forced the family into a new chapter, one built on facts rather than assumptions. In this space, the relationship between law and justice becomes clearer. Justice is not simply about assigning blame. It is about untangling lives that have been tied in knots for decades. The court cannot turn back the clock, but it can provide answers that guide the future. Judge Lake acknowledges the complexity of the situation. She explains that the truth uncovered today does not erase the emotional father-daughter bond that existed. She encourages counseling, emotional processing, and a new search for truth, one that may take the daughter toward other relatives, more DNA investigations, or a complete reevaluation of family history. The courtroom absorbs this transformation. Every person present witnesses the shift from confusion to clarity, from accusations to acceptance, and from silence to truth, even a painful one. The daughter leaves with heartbreak, but also with the beginning of closure. The court has given her a piece of the identity puzzle she's been trying to assemble all her life. The emotional silence left behind in the courtroom slowly gives way to the next wave of complicated stories and painful truths. Judge Lake, steady and focused, moves from one case to another, each reflecting the deep fractures that appear when the truth conflicts with human relationships. The courtroom becomes a place where facts, emotions, and legal standards meet. The themes echo across multiple podcasts and legal discussions. Truth Changes Everything, the Game Changing Attorney podcast, and the Divorce Course podcast. Because what unfolds here is not only about individuals, but about the broader relationship between law and justice. The next matter brought before Judge Lake centers around a young woman who enters the courtroom claiming she was convinced by her partner to conceive a child. What she did not know, however, was that the man she trusted was already married. The case opens layers of betrayal, secrecy, and blurred moral lines. It also reflects a recurring pattern in cheating stories, where truth is often buried beneath manipulation, denial, and emotional chaos. As the mother speaks, she reveals that she believed she was in a committed relationship. She explains that she and the man planned to have a baby together. They timed her ovulation, removed birth control, and prepared emotionally for parenthood. The courtroom audience can sense how deeply she believed in the promise of their relationship. But the moment she found out he was married, her world collapsed, much like many people who regret taking a DNA test after discovering hidden affairs or secret families. The alleged father enters the courtroom with a completely different narrative. He denies being in a relationship and portrays the woman as someone who invented an emotional connection. He claims she was involved with other partners and that he merely entertained her conversations out of fear that she would expose him, contact his wife, or damage his carefully maintained image. The contradiction between the two testimonies is striking and creates tension that ripples across the room. Judge Lake listens as the man fluctuates between denial and accidental admissions. In this case, his words and behavior unintentionally provide adverse inference in evidence, suggesting through contradiction that he may not be telling the full truth. His shifting statements highlight why the Evidence Act emphasizes consistency, clarity, and reliability when determining credibility. The man's wife sits in the courtroom, forced to witness every uncomfortable detail. Her expression reveals the pain of betrayal and the difficulty of hearing intimate secrets spoken in a public courtroom. She listens as her husband admits to sending flirtatious messages to the young woman, including messages sent only days before appearing in court. His own contradictions strip away the protective layers he attempted to build. The courtroom becomes a space where all three individuals must confront a truth none of them wanted to face. This dynamic reveals an important reality in family law. DNA tests often produce results that shape entire futures. They determine responsibility, child support obligations, custody foundations, and emotional commitments. They also force individuals to confront uncomfortable realities they may have run from for years. As often discussed in legal podcasts and recovery testimonies, people may seek truth hoping it will bring peace, but sometimes the truth becomes the catalyst for life-changing pain. While the court awaits the test results, Judge Lake observes that the emotional manipulation within this relationship reflects a deeper imbalance, the man's inability to take responsibility. His behavior demonstrates what legal professionals describe as a disconnect between legal truth and emotional responsibility, a recurring theme in discussions surrounding the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice is not only about the facts, it is also about how those facts impact real lives. When the DNA results are read, the courtroom braces itself. Judge Lake delivers the outcome with clarity. The man is indeed the biological father of the child. For the young mother, this confirmation validates everything she endured. For the wife, It confirms a painful reality she suspected. And for the man, it leaves him trapped between legal duty and moral responsibility. The judge uses this moment to remind everyone present that paternity is not simply a biological matter. It is a legal obligation tied to child support, emotional accountability, and the of the child. The truth carries weight beyond the courtroom, shaping the next chapter of the child's life. The wife expresses her desire for divorce, overwhelmed by the lies, broken trust, and disrespect she witnessed. Her decision reflects the countless stories explored in the Divorce Course podcast, where marriages often fracture irreparably after hidden affairs come to light. The young mother expresses fear for her baby's future, concerned that the man's history of dishonesty will impact his ability to be a stable parent. Judge Lake acknowledges these concerns, emphasizing that the primary responsibility now is the child's. She points out that healing requires honesty, boundaries, and sometimes professional intervention. The courtroom, though chaotic, becomes a place of accountability and awakening for all parties involved. After resolving this emotionally intense session, the next case begins. A married couple seeking answers about the paternity of a young girl named Desire. The mother admits that she cannot be completely certain about the biological father because of overlapping relationships during a fragile, unstable period of her life. This admission shows courage, but also reveals the emotional complexity underlying paternity disputes. The husband expresses that he deeply loves the child, describing their bond as strong and meaningful. However, uncertainty remains an emotional burden he cannot escape. It has fractured their marriage, created tension between family members, and left him wondering whether he has built his life on a foundation of truth or misunderstanding. Judge Lake approaches this case with her characteristic mix of compassion and firmness. She acknowledges that the mother did not intend to deceive the husband, but was overwhelmed by circumstances and fear. This aligns with many stories of paternity uncertainty, where individuals hesitate to reveal the truth to avoid conflict or abandonment. In this case, the mother feared losing the relationship, feared judgment, and feared disrupting the child's life. The courtroom examines conception timelines, medical records, and emotional testimony. The mother presents an ovulation timeline indicating that conception likely occurred during the period she was involved with her husband. She admits she had intercourse with another partner only once during the same general. This single action, however, is enough to create doubt, a doubt that cannot be resolved without scientific testing. Because child support, family structure, and emotional stability depend on factual clarity, DNA evidence becomes the decisive tool. As often discussed in episodes of Supreme Court child support coverage and legal podcasts, paternity testing is essential in creating fair outcomes for all parties, especially the child. The judge calls in expert testimony to clarify misconceptions about genetic traits such as overbites. The court learns that an overbite may be hereditary, but can also develop through environmental habits. This educational moment reflects Judge Lake's commitment to ensuring informed decision-making rather than assumptions. The husband admits emotionally that he is afraid of the results. He fears losing the child he has grown to love. He acknowledges that he built walls to protect himself from the pain of potential disappointment. Judge Lake praises him for this vulnerability, reminding the courtroom that truth and emotional healing are inseparable. The couple is encouraged to confront their feelings honestly, whether the results confirm or reject biological ties. The tension in the room builds as the DNA results are brought forward. Every individual present seems to hold their breath, recognizing that this piece of paper has the power to reshape an entire family's future. When Judge Lake reads the results, the courtroom falls into silence. The husband is revealed not to be the biological father. This moment breaks the mother emotionally. Her tears reflect heartbreak not only for herself but for her husband and their child. She knows the truth will reshape their marriage, their trust, and potentially their family structure. The husband steps out briefly, overwhelmed with emotion. His pain mirrors the struggle of countless people who discover they are not the biological parent of a child they love. When he returns, he reassures his wife that his love for the child remains unchanged. This moment highlights the delicate balance between biology and emotional parenthood. Judge Lake commends him for his honesty and commitment, but also addresses the reality that the child's biological father now must be identified for legal and emotional completeness. The mother admits she knows who the biological father is and that he is reachable. This disclosure allows the court to encourage next steps, another search for truth, another opportunity for closure. The courtroom concludes this segment with a reminder that family truth is not always simple, but clarity is necessary for justice. The emotional journey continues, and Judge Lake prepares for the next chapter of unfolding testimonies. As the previous case closes, the courtroom holds a lingering atmosphere of heartbreak, truth, and heavy emotional realization. Judge Lake understands well that family identity disputes leave behind a trail of confusion and pain, and today's sessions have already revealed how deeply the truth can cut. Yet her courtroom continues to serve as the evidence stage where personal stories collide with the legal framework of justice. The cases that follow carry their own weight of unanswered questions, fragile relationships, and emotional truths waiting to be uncovered. The next matter brought before Judge Lake centers around a woman confronting her past, her identity, and her uncertain origins. The proceedings begin with a solemn awareness that these disputes are not merely about facts, they are about the lifelong search for belonging. Many people, after taking a DNA test, find themselves facing unexpected truths. Some regret taking the test because it alters the foundation on which their identities were built. Judge Lake recognizes this emotional vulnerability and approaches the case with characteristic empathy. The woman in this case stands before the bench as if standing at the crossroads of her entire life. She expresses that the inconsistencies she grew up with have left her unsure of who truly belongs in her story. Her childhood memories, stitched with both love and confusion, collide with official documents that tell an entirely different story. The court notes that decades have passed since her birth, yet the truth remains tangled between what her mother believed, what others perceived, and what the DNA results now expose. As the mother takes the stand once again, the same recurring problem unfolds: lost memories, conflicting accounts, and a lack of reliable evidence from the past. In the world of jurisprudence, especially under the Evidence Act, the absence of clarity often invites adverse inference, where silence or vague answers lead the court to question credibility. Judge Lake gently guides the mother through her recollections, trying to determine whether there were other partners involved, or whether circumstances surrounding conception were more complex than originally stated. This case highlights how the concept of justice in jurisprudence goes beyond black and white answers. Justice here requires patience, careful questioning, and emotional sensitivity. The courtroom becomes a place where identity is not just legally defined, but emotionally rebuilt. The daughter listens with a mixture of fear, anticipation, and exhaustion. Every word her mother speaks holds the possibility of reshaping her entire understanding of herself. The parallels between this case and discussions often featured on the Game-Changing Attorney podcast and Truth Changes Everything podcast become evident. These platforms frequently explore the unpredictable intersection between legal truth, human behavior, and emotional healing. They emphasize how the pursuit of truth can break relationships, expose long-hidden wounds, and yet ultimately restore integrity. In this courtroom, that same journey unfolds in real time. Judge Lake orders an additional DNA comparison, this time involving extended family members who may help trace biological identity. This step demonstrates how modern paternity investigations often require more than one type of test. In matters where the alleged father has passed away or cannot be tested, avuncular or cousin DNA comparisons become essential in reconstructing family lineage. Scientific evidence becomes a guiding light in the darkness of generational confusion. While this test is being processed, the courtroom shifts to another case involving child support, marital strain, and the consequences of uncertain paternity. The man involved claims he is overwhelmed by responsibility for a child he may not biologically father. The mother argues she has always been truthful, but minor inconsistencies in her timeline raise doubts. The court must determine whether the man has legal responsibility under Supreme Court child support principles, which reinforce that financial obligation depends on biological connection, unless legal adoption or long-term acknowledgement has occurred. Judge Lake carefully reviews dates, medical records, and the parties' testimonies. She emphasizes that in family court, truth is often layered, requiring both factual analysis and acknowledgement of human frailty. The man appears deeply conflicted, expressing that he wants to do what is right but cannot carry the emotional weight of uncertainty. The mother insists on her own truth, yet the absence of clear corroboration requires testing.